Listener-supported St. Gabriel Catholic Radio AM 820 brings you Family Sanctuary, a show that inspires living the gospel message in word and deed within our families. And now, Family Sanctuary with host Peggy Hartshorn.
Welcome to the Family Sanctuary, focusing on life-giving relationships and the family. I'm your host, Peggy Hartshorn, chairman of Heartbeat International, that advances life-affirming pregnancy help around the world. And today we have a program that is near and dear to my heart, the subject of which, I should say, is near and dear to my heart, and that is adoption. And we've been doing a series of programs here on St. Gabriel, on the Family Sanctuary, about adoption, and we've got a beautiful, beautiful story for you today about the option of fostering to adopt. And that is a very powerful way of being able to build a family, whether you have biological children already or not. And in the case of our guests, that was the case. But they were building their family through fostering to adopt. And there's a tremendous need for that in our nation today. In the United States now, there's estimated to be about 102,000 children waiting to be adopted from foster care. And more than 2,600 of those children are waiting in the state of Ohio. So there's a tremendous need. And so let's find out a little bit more about that beautiful option, and particularly from our guest today. Our guest is Michelle Morse. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
A wonderful adoptive mother and biological mother also. And Michelle is married to Terry. They've been married for 18 years. Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And they're in St. Paul's in Westerville Parish. And Michelle is part of Elizabeth Ministry. And we've had several guests on from Elizabeth Ministry. You can find their programs in the archives about adoption and about all kinds of issues related to mothering and to women in their age of fertility. Mm-hmm. And so you're part of that support group, which I just think is such a phenomenal group. They're called Elizabeth Ministry, let's mention, because as Mary visited Elizabeth and Elizabeth welcomed Mary, both in their stage of pregnancy, the ministry focuses in on one-on-one support for women, whatever their issues are or needs are in their childbearing years. It could be infertility. It could be miscarriage. It could be childbearing and issues and problems related to that. Just need for support for moms with little children. Adoption, of course, is a major issue. Mm-hmm. That is something on the that could be a need and a blessing, of course, for women and families in the age when their children are small. So it's a great ministry. I'm so glad you're involved in that, Michelle.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, Michelle, tell us about your family. You have a mixture of biological children and children that you fostered to adopt. Tell us about your family.
So we started out with 2 biological children. We have 2 that are in high school, a son and a daughter. And then our next one down is our first adopted child, our daughter, Sari, and she's in middle school. Then we have 9, Will, and then we have our baby, who's 4, Tessa.
What a beautiful, beautiful group. And I've seen a picture of your family. Wow, yes. How gorgeous
Thank you.
They are. And so God placed this idea or this call to adopt children, placed it on your heart early on.
Yes.
How did that happen? Tell us about that story.
It's funny because that's probably the biggest question I get is, whatever made you want to adopt? It was something, like you said, it has been in my heart since I was a child. I always knew that I wanted to adopt. It was always something that intrigued me and was always there. And it wasn't until I got older and when I met my husband, it was actually something we both talked about before we even got married. And the Lord placed it in his heart as well.
Isn't
because
that amazing?
We talked about that we wanted to adopt someday, not knowing if we were going to be able to have biological children or not. We have had the blessing of having 2 biological children. But then it was pretty crazy at first because very soon after we got married, we were pregnant, and 9 months later, here comes Nate. And then when he was only 6 months old, we were pregnant again. And so they are very close. We had very full hands. And we thought, ooh, this adoption thing is going to have to be put on the back burner for a while. And then it was when
God always has interesting plans,
yes,
doesn't he?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then it was when our daughter was about 2 years old that we started looking again. And we thought, let's talk about adoption. And that's when the whole plan started unfolding.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So how did that plan unfold? For those who may be listening and say, well, how would I, even if God has this on my heart, how would I proceed? What would I do? Who would I call?
Right.
How did you proceed when realized, okay, now's the time to start throwing out the net, let's say?
Right. And that's where I started on the internet and just kind of started looking around. And most of what I was seeing was more about the traveling overseas. And with having 2 little ones, that wasn't as great of an option for us. Financially, it can be very expensive.
For international adoption.
International adoption. And then the requirement for some countries to travel and to remain in that country for a while. And then as I was looking, of all things, there was something that popped up in the newspaper. It was an advertisement or a promotion type thing that said foster parents needed. And I thought, ooh, that's interesting. Wonder what that's about. It was sponsored through the United Methodist Children's Home. And so that was my kind of first step.
This was local.
This was
here,
local. Yes.
In our diocese.
In our diocese. And so I went to an informational meeting with the intent of just grabbing some information and let's see where this goes. My husband didn't go to that initial one, stayed with the kids, and then I kind of brought home some information, and I knew right from there that was our plan.
That was interesting. So something there helped you to feel, this is feasible. Here's
Yes.
an opportunity.
Yes.
This program or this approach is something that just felt right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I connected with it immediately. I think to have the kids right here in our backyard that are in need of a family, that touched my heart. I wasn't sure about the financial piece at that time, but what we came to learn is that there's, very little to no cost, depending on the situation. Everything's different for each individual adoption, but there were just many things that really touched me. And
so again, particularly for people listening who might be interested in pursuing this, do the agencies that provide foster care to adoption, I know there are others besides United Methodist Children's Home,
Yes.
which still, of course, does provide that service.
Yes.
I believe the Franklin County Children's Services also provides that.
correct.
Right.
And if listeners would go on to, it's the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, then from there's a link about foster care and kinship, and there's a whole list of different agencies in every different county and
that do foster care to adoption.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And one of the things that's interesting to me, having been in the pro-life movement, of course, since 1973, and thank you, adoption has always been for me and for those of us involved in the pro-life movement, such a beautiful option that we hope more and more people will consider. And my husband and I actually have adopted 2 children as well. They're grown now and married, and we have 5 grandchildren. Wow. So had their birth mothers not made a decision for life, we wouldn't have been able to build that family. And so we love the option of adoption.
Absolutely.
And yet there have been quite a few obstacles to foster care, to adoption in the past. As I've seen that whole option develop through the years, sometimes birth mothers, of course, don't choose adoption for their children, but when they begin the process of trying to raise the child, obstacles appear, barriers appear. Sometimes their children are taken from them, and programs are developed to try to help those moms and dads to develop the skills they need to be able to parent the children. But there have been some, I think, positive revisions in the foster care programs in the last maybe decade or so that really have allowed more children to be adopted from those programs.
Yes.
So if our listeners have heard of those barriers and that almost the dead end street of foster care to adoption, that has really changed. I would say, in the last decade or so.
I would absolutely agree. There are a lot of children that are fully ready to be adopted.
Once they even come into foster care.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's
and with
great.
our situation in particular, our first daughter, Sari, started out as a fostering to adopt situation. I think the social workers know, even if a child is in foster care, if it looks like they are on the path
toward adoption
or not, if it's reunification. And for some, that's what it needs to be. And that's wonderful if that can be the case.
Sure.
But for us,
you knew when you brought Sari into your home
We did.
that she was on a path of foster
Yes.
care to adoption. I think that would be comforting to a lot of people who might
Absolutely.
consider this option.
Right.
Because they might think, how could I allow the child to go back into a different home
Right.
after I have become so bonded to that child
Yes.
in foster care. So it's good to know that, at least in many cases, when you bring a foster child into your home, if your intent is foster to adopt, then the agency can pretty much assure you this child is on that path.
Correct.
That's good to know.
And there are some children who are not, they are in the foster care system, but they are already like permanent placement is ready. And so they can go directly
Immediately from
Yes.
foster care into adoption.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Without, right.
That's
without
amazing.
question.
So you adopted Sari.
Yes.
And then what? Did you think, well, now we fulfilled the desire of
We
my
did.
heart and my
Yes.
husband's heart, and this is it.
This is
We
it.
have
3
Sari.
kids.
Isn't it wonderful?
Yes, yes, it sure was. And at the time, we were still visiting and in touch with birth mom and birth dad. We kept kind of an open adoption by our choice, fully by our choice. And birth mom let us know that she was pregnant again. And that kind of took us by surprise. And we talked about it and prayed about it. But we knew that next baby was going to be ours. And she specifically said, I want you to have this child.
Wow.
Never thought I would hear those words come from anyone's mouth. But what a blessing.
So when you actually brought your second adopted child into the home, his mother had already really finalized her adoption plan.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's amazing. And so tell me that child's name. Is it Will?
So that's Will.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you've got Sari and Will, and then a third daughter,
A third daughter.
Tessa.
Yes.
And she's also a biological
She
sibling.
is, the 3 of them. And we have been blessed to bring each of them home from the hospital. It's been amazing.
Wow.
Yes. They not without issues. I mean, it's not a fairy tale by any means. There's
Sure.
been challenges and
Sure.
different things along the way, some health issues. Sari was born premature. She was only 2 pounds, 3 ounces. So there were medical issues in the beginning and lots of doctor's appointments and different things. But by the time she was 2, she was fully caught up. Now at the age of 12, I'm not a tall woman, but I'm average. She's taller than me. I mean, she's big and beautiful. And it's amazing to see what God has done for her.
Wow. Well, I think we want to talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that people face. Before we do that, though, I'd like to reintroduce our guest. Our guest today is Michelle Morse. She and her husband, Terry, are members of St. Paul's in Westerville. And Michelle's part of the Elizabeth Ministry, which helps one-on-one support for mothers, women in childbearing age with any issues that affect them. It's a beautiful ministry, and Michelle and Terry both had in their hearts God's call to adopt, and God has fulfilled that vision and hope with 3 beautiful adopted children, Sari, Will, and Tessa, and they're now 12, 9, and 4.
Yes.
As well as your 2 biological children, Nate and is it Shay?
Shay.
Nate and Shay, who are 16 and 15.
Yes.
So he's built that beautiful family through foster care to adopt. So we were talking about how God put together such a beautiful family. And by the way, it's also a biracial family, right? So let's talk about some of the challenges that people need to be aware of if they're thinking about foster care to adopt, if they've been thinking this might be an option for us. And yet maybe they've heard some some stories that would give them big pause. There are problems. You're going to be adopting a child perhaps who has had a negative foster care experience already, and or a negative experience with biological parents, may have suffered abuse, neglect. There may be issues and problems. You mentioned your first child, Sari, who was in the neonatal intensive care unit for how many months?
3 months.
3 months, and had some biological challenges and issues early on, which she has overcome. God has provided healing for that, which is beautiful and wonderful. So in some cases, I'm aware of some cases where children who have come from foster care to adoption had continuing issues and problems. And so what would you say to parents who are saying, I don't know whether I should even take that first step because I've heard some of these issues. I've heard of cases that are really challenging. What would you say to parents who may have this in their hearts that possibly God has adoption for them, for older children?
Well, I have to say, when we first started talking about this and sharing this with our family, that was some of the concerns that we were hearing. Oh, gosh, you don't know what you're going to get. These aren't your children. You don't know what their background, what they've, even though ours that we ultimately adopted were babies. So they didn't have some of the things that maybe older children would possibly deal with. But I have to say, even with our own children, you don't know what you're going to get. That's for sure. we've
that
had
gene mix can be surprising.
Yes, absolutely. But I think it's also important to keep in mind as you are adopting through foster care, they really work with you to figure out what you are willing and able and wanting to handle as far as a child that you would be adopting. And so I think it looks at you. And
I think your story is interesting, fascinating, how God broadened your view or vision of what kinds of children you would be open to adopt.
Right. So at first, I think I had in my head, we're going to just, bring home this little girl or little boy that's just going to kind of match and just fit in with our family as far as blonde hair, brown eyes, And here we are waiting for that little child. And then at some point, God said, open your eyes. And he did. He opened my eyes. And how silly of me to think that it had to be like that. And here we have 3 beautiful African-American children that have joined our family. And boy, I would not have it any other way. I love our diversity of our family and our blend. And it's just, they're beautiful.
How has that worked in family and community acceptance in the church? People can say pretty strange things. Sure. I remember when our children were little, we had a babysitting co-op. We lived in German Village, and we had I think there were 26 families in the babysitting co-op. And there were a variety of races. These children all were beautiful, wonderful children. We loved to have them, the moms interchanged babysitting for each other. And at one point, I had maybe 4 or 5 of them with me in the grocery store. Very diverse group of children. And I got the strangest comments, I won't say what they were, but I know people make judgments. People say stupid things. Sure. And sometimes they just don't know what to say. And even if they're not making a negative judgment, something comes out of their mouth which sounds very negative.
Right. That's been more the case that I've probably experienced is I don't think anyone has had any so much of a negative comments that I've received. I think that silly questions have been asked or the way they've been posed maybe. But I think people, from what I've experienced, it's more out of curiosity than anything. Just kind of, we'll get those looks like trying to figure out, what's that story? What's that situation? So we've definitely had that. Now, a kind of a cute one, and actually a children's book that I wrote was based off of a situation where my daughter, Sari, was in preschool, and we were going for that first field trip and meeting all the kids there, and she brings me in, and she's all proud to introduce Mommy, and I see this little boy, another African-American child, kind of running back and forth between her and then running to a group of other kids and running back, and then he looks at her and he goes, why is your mom white? Just trying to figure out, it was another 4-year-old out of just pure innocence, just trying to figure out how did that happen? So
isn't that neat, even coming from children, instead of an adult saying, why are your children black? Why is your mommy white?
Right, exactly. Why don't you match? That's what it's all about.
Let's talk a minute about your book. I love your book that God has also put on your heart.
Thank you.
And it's called Handpicked.
Yes.
Which I love the title of this. So, so you wrote a little book. It's about you and Sari.
It is.
Yes.
And it's all about celebrating the similarities, but celebrating the differences as well, and embracing them, and realizing that you don't have to match on the outside to be a perfect match on the inside. And that's what it's all about.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's really about adoption. It's about transracial families. It's about loving and accepting each other, no matter of the external dissimilarities.
Right.
What we all share in common, made in the image and likeness of God, beautiful people through and through, and how God intended us for each other. It's beautiful. So it's available on Amazon, right?
Yes.
That's great.
Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Yeah, I think if you just go online, there's...
Handpicked. Beautiful.
Thank you.
So tell us about, again, particularly for people who might be wondering more about this on a practical level, the kinds of support that's available for families like yours. And also, you touched on this, but let's go into it a little more. What about the cost? Because a lot of people say, I've heard adoption is so expensive.
And I believe it can be. With our experience through fostering to adopt, actually, as we brought the children home, we were provided with subsidies to purchase clothes, to purchase food, different things. And not to say that we were a family in need of financial assistance necessarily, but that goes with it. And that was something that kind of took us by surprise. We did not even realize that was going to be the case. But boy, what a blessing.
Sure.
And then I think through the process, the only fee that there were attorney fees when we were finalizing things. And because of the adoption tax credit, that covered that. So honestly, there was zero cost for us.
That's wonderful. The state of Ohio has really done well, I think, in incentives to encourage adoption of these children. We mentioned earlier on the program, 2,600 children in the state of Ohio waiting to be adopted. And I know that's been a priority of our state to try to smooth out some of the barriers and obstacles in the way for people to adopt. And what about support? Now, I suppose at least at St. Paul's, since you have the Elizabeth Ministries, that's been a great source of support.
And that's what I joined Elizabeth Ministry for, just to have another woman, and in this case, several women, to just kind of walk along that journey with me. And it's been such a blessing. And I feel like I've been able to share my story through the Elizabeth Ministry and be able to reach out and touch other people and hopefully encourage others to maybe take our same path.
I'm sure that your heart for it and your enthusiasm for it and the beauty that you have found in this foster to adoption program has been a tremendous inspiration.
It has.
So let me give actually the St. Paul's office number.
Okay.
And if anyone's listening who would like support from Elizabeth Ministries, whether it's in relation to adoption or any area in terms of women's fertility, childbearing years, for one-on-one support, that could be an issue with miscarriage, infertility, adoption, parenting of young children. What are some of the other issues that you've seen Elizabeth Ministry become involved in?
I think you've covered most of them, but it really anything and everything having to do with the childbearing years.
Okay.
It's just another woman to walk alongside of you, be supportive of you, and just share and celebrate pregnancy too. If we see a woman at church that's pregnant, we want to go up and give her a hug and say congratulations, and we're excited for you, and we'll be praying for you, and
Isn't that great?
Yes.
I love the motto, every child a welcome child.
Yes.
And I also try to welcome any child in the womb.
Yes.
So the St. Paul's office, in case anyone would like to get in touch with Elizabeth Ministry, is 614-882-2109. And you don't have to be a member of St. Paul's Parish to become part of the Elizabeth Ministry and get their help and support. So that's a wonderful resource. And we want to remind people also of the beautiful book that you've written, Handpicked, which is available through Barnes & Noble and Amazon. So we just have a brief period of time here to finish up our program, Michelle. We haven't asked much about your husband. How has he reacted and responded to this as the father of such a beautiful and unique family?
He's been amazing. He's a wonderful father, wonderful husband, and boy, he's the one that's down on the floor, wrestling around with the big ones, wrestling around with the small ones. I mean, he's amazing.
And your older
grateful.
Children, they've become kind of, I suppose, they're the oldest, and a boy and a girl.
Yes.
What a beautiful example you've given them for parenting in the future. And I saw the picture of your family. They just look thrilled, to have their brothers and sisters.
They're so proud. Yes, yes. And especially I think of my older son who takes his little brother everywhere he goes and is so proud to introduce him. And it's fun.
Yeah, and the smiles on all of their faces. I said, when I saw your family picture, really, although the skin color is not identical, the smiles on the faces and the sparkle in the eyes is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
So thank you again, Michelle, for being with us and sharing your beautiful story. And you're all listening to The Family Sanctuary on St. Gabriel Catholic Radio. I'm Peggy Hartshorn, your host. Archives of our program and many other programs are available at stgabrielradio.com, and we're streaming live on stgabrielradio.com. The Family Sanctuary is broadcast every Saturday at 4 and on Sundays at 2. So please join us again to strengthen our families and make them sanctuaries of life as God intends.
Family Sanctuary is a production of listener-supported St. Gabriel Catholic Radio, AM 820. Archives of Family Sanctuary with Peggy Hartshorn are available at stgabrielradio.com.